My name is Aiden, and I'm an educator here at the Natural History Museum of Utah. And thank you so much for joining us for our wonderful post Research Quest class interview with my friends Colby and Rob. I'm going to go ahead and start y'all's videos. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you all doing today?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. We've been watching y'all's wonderful work because Colby and Rob were both in the filming production of our Uinta research investigations. The videos are important because Dr. Mitch Powers and Isabel Vega are going to tell us all sorts of important information about the Uinta Forest. And without Colby and Rob, that would be much harder to do. Friends, if you have any, I have some questions to start off with, but if you have any questions for Colby or Rob, please feel free to press the ask a question button or leave us a comment on Facebook because we would love to share your question. So let me go ahead and get started by finding, where'd all my questions go? I found them, don't worry. I know there's a bunch of questions for both of you. I think the first question people ask is like, how does a video like that actually get made? Like, how is the script written? How do you find the right like spot? Any of that stuff?
Sure. Colby, is it okay if I start off since I'm earlier in the process?
You should, yes.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. My name's Rob Blatt. I'm the writer for the scripts. That's my primary role with the Research Quest investigations. And that means after the scientists and the education experts at the museum have come up with an idea to create a lesson, and they've come up with what they want students to learn and explore during that lesson, they come to me with some specific ideas about each step in the overall investigation. It takes many steps. And there are videos as part of that investigation, as maybe you've already seen some of them. So for each of those videos, I write a script. I write where the host, the narrator, whoever it is going to be standing, what ideas and concepts they're going to say to camera. And then I also sometimes suggest ideas for what kind of animation should appear or what kind of words on the screen should appear. And I do that for each of the videos within the investigation. But writing a script is, there are many drafts, many revisions, as you're probably working on learning how to revise your writing. That's something that we do professionally as writers. And so I'll write a first draft of the script, but then I send it back to the scientists and the education experts at the museum, and they send me back feedback. Oh, the way that you described this, it isn't quite accurate. Or we want to make sure that we really emphasize these ideas because we want students to really get a chance to practice these concepts. So those are the first few revisions of the script. And then after me and the scientists and museum staff have all clarified what we want the scripts to look like, then we take it to Colby's team. And Colby is the producer. I'll let him describe in more detail what he's doing, but one of his roles as producer is to make sure that all of my crazy ideas are actually feasible. Can they actually shoot the kinds of things that I'm suggesting in the script? And so Colby and his team will look at the script and say, you know, this idea is great, or I think I know a place where we can shoot this with video, or that idea is going to be kind of hard to pull off, to really show visually on the video. So can you come up with a different idea, Rob? Or can we come up with a new idea altogether? And after we've gone back and forth on the script a couple more times, the whole script goes off to Colby and his team.
And then Colby, once you have like the script in hand and you've used the voice of reason to say like, oh, here's how we're going to like meet in the middle between like what your script wants to do and like reality. Not that you're not in touch with reality, Rob, but I've also written scripts every once in a while for
Sure.
things and pitched an idea, and someone's like, that's not even something that we can do.
Sure.
So once you've weighed in, Colby, like, where does the process take you from there?
So yeah, I mean, there's lots of meetings in pre-production, and reading the scripts, going through the scripts, and really doing what we call a script breakdown, which means that we, go line by line, and we're looking for everything from who's on screen, who's the talent that is involved, what locations are we looking at, props, and what do we need to hold in our hands, and from there, we really get into the producing role, which is, kind of the easiest way to say it is like bringing all the puzzle pieces together to make the puzzle work. So scheduling is part of that, finding locations is part of that, permitting and getting permission to go to those locations is part of that. One thing with the Uinta investigations is, it was cold. It was like right before winter hit. And actually, while we were up there filming, the day we were filming, about the last probably hour, it started to snow on us pretty good. So yeah. So in some of the Mitch videos, you'll see, a light snow start, and then it got pretty crazy. So it's, it's I would say from initial kind of initial contact from the museum to us, to the time that we have a finished product and what you guys are watching, is probably 6 to 8 months worth of work.
That's a lot of work and a lot of time. I definitely noticed when we were watching that there's like some videos where I'm like, Dr. Mitch and Isabel look very cold. Like the tip of their nose would be a little bit red or whatever. And I'd be like, they look a little bit chilly.
Yeah, it was cool.
When it comes to filming outdoors, you mentioned like the weather and a little bit of snow. What other challenges does filming outside present? Or how do you, when you have a space as big as like the Uinta Mountains, that was my best Rob impersonation. How do you find a spot to film?
That's a really good question. You do location scouting. So myself and Alec, who is the cinematographer or the guy behind the camera, probably spent, I would say, 2 days driving around in the mountains looking for spots. And mostly we were looking for, and Mitch, Dr. Mitch is really familiar with the Uintas as well, so could help guide and point us kind of in directions of where we wanted to go, because there were some pretty specific things that we were looking for. But when you're looking for locations, yes, like you said, Uinta Mountains are huge. So there's lots of things that you got to keep in mind, like travel time and how long is it going to take us to get there? Can we park our cars and gear close, or do we have to hike into some location? So kind of all of those factors play into it, as well as there's lots of challenges to filming outside. One being, when you're in a public space like the Uinta Mountains, you're dealing with other people. So trying to figure out when best to work around that. You're dealing with the sun and its intensity and clouds all change throughout the day. So you have to keep in mind things like, what you're shooting at the beginning of the day when the sun is low, or where you can shoot in the middle of the day when the sun is in the middle of the sky. And then sound is a really big issue when you get outside too, because you can't really control it that well. And one other problem that we ran into is the first shots of Isabel in the video when she's kind of out in that big wide open field. We started with that in the morning, and the ground was frozen when we got there because it was cold. But as we started filming, found out that we weren't actually standing on solid ground. We were in like a marsh.
Oh.
So as the ground started melting, we started sinking. So we had to move.
Oh, yeah. It's important to be flexible when you're sinking into the ground. we actually, as part of my job and Andy's job, Andy was teaching our You Into Mountain investigation. We get to talk to all sorts of elementary school students, and through Research Quest, we've been speaking with a lot of middle school students and high school students. And it seems like there's, in general, an interest in like filming things. And I remember filming things when I was a kid, like an actual camera in like the park or whatever. Can people just film anywhere?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I know there's a lot of like young kids that want to start with filming and things like that. And
Mhm.
so like, are there things that, especially like young people just getting started and who want to try filming, like, are there things that they need to keep in mind to make sure they're doing everything right?
Well, first and foremost, have fun. That's the first thing you want to do.
Critical.
Yeah.
Critical. There's no sense in doing it if you're not having fun. I always say that, if you're in a public space like the park, and you're not bothering other people, or you're not making a huge mess, or you're not taking up the entire park, then, if it's you and a couple of your friends out there making a movie, fine. But also I would say it never hurts to ask too. So, if you're filming in, you want a shot in a grocery store, or you want something like that, then, always just rarely are you told no if you just explain what you're doing and what you're looking for. So it's always usually best practice to just ask for permission.
I would
Ask
say,
for permission instead of forgiveness, maybe.
yeah. And I would say that some of those challenges you can avoid if you're thinking through in the writing phase about what you want to shoot and where you want to shoot. Because first, let your imagination run wild when you're just typing on the page. Go to all the crazy places and locations that you want to. But then as you're thinking about it from the producer perspective about actually going somewhere, you think, well, this playground is not going to be too busy if I shoot there at 8 in the morning, so maybe I can go shoot over there at this time. But if I'm going to shoot there at 11, maybe that's not the best location. Maybe I'm going to have to pick a backyard or something else. Just in the writing phase, you can avoid some of those challenges that you might come to if you just want to run out and start shooting video right away.
Sure. And Rob, I have a question for you, right?
Yeah.
In the same vein of a lot of students talking to us about being interested in like filming things and all sorts of different kinds of filming things. When it comes to writing a script, do you have any tips for students who are first starting? These are probably amongst their first writing projects to begin with.
Sure. Well, it always helps to have an idea about who your audience is, or what your audience is going to be interested in seeing. I mean, if you're making it for yourself and your friends, then you really have a clear idea of who your audience is. Maybe you're making a video for your science class or your English class, and so you're giving a presentation. So picture those students in the classroom if you're preparing that video presentation. What are the things that they're going to already know, and what are the things that are obvious to you because you've already been researching the topic or creating the story, but it's not going to be clear to them unless you explain it or show it through your characters or your host. So try to always keep the audience's perspective in mind when you're creating something. That would be my first tip. And then, like Colby was saying, just have fun, explore things, try things. And when it's still on the page, when you're still just typing ideas, and they're still developing, or once you've got your first draft, resist the temptation to run out and shoot your video right away. I've always benefited as a professional writer, as I described earlier, I take those scripts to, in my case, scientists and education experts and producers and cinematographers, and even the host, the talent. Those are the people who are on camera. We call them the talent. The host, who often was the scientist. Yes, like you, the talent, the on-camera talent. And if I have a script, I say to them also, does this make sense? Since you're coming at it from, I know everything. I've got all the information in my mind. When you're reading it as somebody who doesn't know the background or the story or who this character is that I'm trying to create, does it make sense to you? Are there things that I could change to make it clearer and more understandable? And in the case of writing for a host, I also want to get feedback from the host, because sometimes a host will say, Well, you got the idea right, but it's really hard for me to say it that way. That's how you, Rob, might say it, but that's not how I, Isabel, or I, Mitch, might say it. So, is it okay if we change the script a little bit so that when we're actually out there on set and we're shooting, it just flows naturally for me to deliver these lines? Those are my quick thoughts on how to prepare a script and go shoot your fun idea right
Yeah.
away.
Well, I know that you did a bunch of different filming, and you did not just do filming in the Uinta Mountains, in the Uinta Forest. Next week, friends, we are going to be continuing our investigation of the Uinta Forest, and I know that you all used a really unique. We're gonna trailer, like teaser it a little bit.
Okay.
I know you used a really interesting model with Dr. Mitch for how a forest works. Can you tell us more about your unique filming experiences there?
I think, Colby, do you know what she's talking about? I think she's talking about okay, yeah. So you take it. Well, maybe
Yeah.
I'll say
for it.
for starters, we were trying to come up with an idea to show viewers a metaphor, a comparison for how a forest processes things. And you could think of it as a machine. So we were coming up with ideas for what kind of a machine could we compare the way that a forest takes sunlight energy and converts it into the energy that animals and plants need, and then performs processes, gives life, cleans water, purifies water. So we were trying to come up with metaphors. And then the script had an idea for a place where newspapers are printed. And for a few reasons, we thought maybe that wouldn't work. So Colby and his team had a much better idea. How did it go from there, Colby?
Well, we really tried for the newspaper printing place, but there's only one in the valley, so it became more and more difficult. So taking the idea of a machine and trying to figure out what that machine could look like. I guess I'll spoil the surprise. I don't know.
Go for it. For it.
We ended up in a car wash. And like an automatic car wash, not like the kind you go and you put quarters in and you scrub your own car, but an automatic car wash. And so we had a couple of challenges there. One being, how do you film inside of a car wash? There's like water and soap and hot things. So we went inside the car to get most of our footage, but then we had a really big issue with lighting, because how do you light inside of a car when you're inside of a car washer? And sound, because we've all been through a car wash, or I would hope that we've all been through a car wash. It's pretty loud. So there was lots of unique challenges that we kind of had to overcome there. And ultimately what it came down to is we just had to try it a lot. So that's actually my car, and it got really clean because I think we went through that car wash maybe 10-ish times before we had enough, before we could move on to what we needed.
That's very cool. Friends, next week we are going to be watching the footage of, we're watching the successful cut together beautiful version.
Yes.
And you can just know in your heart it took 10 tries through the car wash to get all of that footage. So tune in next week for the rest of our Uinta investigation. And friends listening from home right now, if you have a question for Rob or Colby, press the Ask a Question button or leave us a comment on Facebook, and we would love to get back to you and ask your question. I have a few more questions. Let's see. We have one here from Mary in Salt Lake City, who asks, how many crew members were on location?
A good question. There were 6 of us behind the camera. So myself, Rob was on set with us for most of the time. Madeline, who is a representative from the Natural History Museum. Alec, who is my cinematographer. He's the guy behind the camera. And then we had a sound person and a grip as well. And I guess that was just for Uintas when we were in the valley filming it at the museum and those other places. On those days, I think we had 8. So we had a couple of extra hands on those days.
What does a grip do?
Ooh, that's a good question. So they are on the team of the people that like the movie, but essentially they're extra pair of hands. So Yeah, they grip stuff and they move stuff and they carry stuff, and they're a very pivotal part of, especially if, when you're filming outside. Well, both when you're filming outside or inside, of just being able to move stuff quickly and get it there, and know how to set up a stand correctly. So if you're outside and the wind blows, it doesn't fall on somebody, and
Right.
all that kind of stuff.
Sounds like filming in and of itself is its own like wonderful machine of like everybody doing a job and it all working nicely together.
Yes.
Um, I know we've had a few teachers tuning in to our investigations as well, and so I would like to ask a question on behalf of a lot of teachers. I know some of them have reached out saying that like, who knows what the next school year is going to totally look like, and there may be more video teaching that happens. Do you have any tips, either one of you, for teachers who may be making videos for their students, about how, like any kind of tip really, I'm sure they'd appreciate.
Hmm.
Because
Well,
in
I have a
general, they
couple.
know their audience really well because they're their
Sure.
students.
Sure. Well, I have a couple of thoughts. Because I'm also student teaching right now, so I'm creating videos for my students, and I'm getting some experience with this. One tip that I learned from other science video makers that I really like on YouTube was that our regular conversation energy, if we're talking, first of all, I think talking to camera and seeing a face for at least some of a video makes a big difference. It's very engaging. If we are just looking at still images and words on the screen, it's just not as engaging for the viewer. Even though the students know you and love you, it's great for them to see your face. So Screencastify is one program that I've used a little bit, but there are ways of getting yourself onto the camera for some of the video. And the other thing I would say is that use that same energy that you have when you're actually standing up in front of your students, because sometimes we on camera think that our conversational energy is more energetic or appears more energetic than it actually does.
Mm.
So actually, like, give yourself a little extra cup of coffee or a little extra juice when you're giving that presentation, because your slightly higher energy will come off to the viewer as normal and engaging, but not overly enthusiastic. So those are my two tips for creating videos for your students.
Thanks, Rob. Colby, do you want to weigh in?
Echoing what Rob says, but I would also like, the biggest thing that we have learned through, now granted, I'm not a teacher and I don't spend my time on Zoom calls, but well, I do, but not teaching. But I would say length is really important too. And you want to keep things really, really short and concise and to the point. And that's a really good way. That's a really nice benefit that recording something brings to the table too, because, usually when you're explaining something, it might take a little bit longer, but when you're filming it, you have the chance to sit down before you start filming and really think through the process, and then only film what you need, keeping things, pretty concise and short, is because people's attention spans, as we all know, are pretty limited nowadays.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. I know a lot of teachers appreciate that. We're getting a few more questions in. Oliver from Washington is asking, ooh, this is a good question for both of you. What do you love about your work? What a nice question, Oliver.
Yeah. Well, as a writer, I love that I can, well, the first thing that I love about this assignment, and I will say this is really one of my favorite assignments of all time in all my professional work, is I get to work with experts, both in the sciences and in education. So I'm learning all kinds of cool things. We wrote research quest investigations, as you know, about the forest and about beetles and about trees. And we did ones on dinosaur bones. And this is all fascinating information to me. I mean, I'm a naturally curious person, as I think most people are. So I love that aspect of it. I get to talk to scientists about their expertise and people who are experts at teaching these ideas too. So I'm learning the best ways to explain and convey these ideas and give students opportunities to really practice these methods, these critical thinking methods. So I love all of that. And then the creativity, coming up with different ways to make these stories about the forest and about animals in the forest and plants in the forest. How do you convey the crisis that a plant is facing to make it interesting and high stakes and engaging? Those are fun challenges. So I like all of that stuff. It's a fun way to spend your day, and it's collaborative too, because you get to work with other people.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the storytelling aspect was what really got me into filmmaking. So I started when I was in junior high, actually, just making films on my own, but really loved the documentary aspect. So sitting down and talking to people and understanding their story, and being able to tell that story in a different way than just writing it down on a piece of paper. Secondly, it is like I love the collaboration aspect of it, and I am driven by passionate people. So especially in the Research Quest series, surrounded by a lot of experts and a lot of very passionate people, which just like makes me want to do better too. So it's kind of always challenging. And then I like producing, particularly because it is that puzzle piece. It's like really getting in there and spending a lot of time thinking about sometimes pretty challenging problems of, how do we pay for it? How do we feed people in the middle of the place? How do we keep people warm? And when they are not warm and they're mad at me, how do I get them back? We still have to work together. So that's always a fun challenge too. And then at the end of the day, it's the product. It's kind of you've created this thing that then you get to share with the world. That's pretty fulfilling as well. So
We've been sharing it a lot this whole time. Andy and Mariana and Tracy and a whole bunch of people on the Natural History Museum team have been involved with the Research Quest. So we've all loved teaching it a bunch of times. So we've seen your video. They're lovely. We do have some more questions coming in. Jason from Ogden asks, oh, okay. Seems a good question. How do you minimize wind sounds in the outdoors? My cell phone picks it up a lot.
Good question. All right.
That's a good question. So there's a couple of different techniques. We use a two-system sound. So there's a lav on the person, which is like a little capsule that you put super close to their mouth, and it transmits to the recorder. And then we also use a boom pole and a shotgun mic, which is
the thing that sometimes falls in bad movies.
Yes.
Okay, got you.
Yep. That's a job. You just have to stand there with your arms over your head for hours on end. Super exciting. But on both of those things, there's a device that is known in the industry as a dead cat. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting name, but it's essentially just a fuzzy, let's see if I had one in my office here. I don't, but it's like a fuzzy, it's just like a fuzzy thing. It kind of looks like a sock, I guess you could say, but like a super fuzzy sock. And they also make one for a lav that you put on there, and it just has fuzz on it. And essentially that eliminates most wind noise. Now, if you're in a super windy condition, there's not a ton you can do, but it's kind of a magic piece of gear that helps with that. If you're recording from a cell phone, that makes it a little bit harder. But there's a couple of devices that you can buy that are similar that can help with that stuff. Or the other thing that works is if you happen to have two cell phones, if you're working with somebody and they have a cell phone too, the other thing that you can do is put one of them in your pocket while you're recording with the other one, and your clothes will act as a little bit of a wind dampener too, which helps with a lot of that wind noise.
I always think it is so creative, the different ways people, especially when you have a budget of very little, like the different ways that people overcome things. I know my sister and I used to make a bunch of videos when we were kids, and one of the tricks, you'd hop on a moving, a rolly chair and push it for one of those panning shots. It was always a lot of fun.
Sure, that's great.
Yeah. We were trying to do the Jaws panning thing. That was one of our favorite movies. Let's see. Do we have time for one more question? Let's see. Oh, okay. Andy from Salt Lake City wants to know, what is one of the funniest things that happened while you were filming? End on a high note.
Okay.
No pressure.
Let's see.
That's a
Well,
hard one.
discovering that we were on a marsh was pretty funny. So when Colby was describing the sound guy, the sound person,
Uh-huh.
so imagine that there's a sound person, but they're slowly sinking down. So that was going on, and everybody's feet were cold. It was funny. It was like we were laughing because I got to say, Colby runs a very positive crew, a positive set. So it was, we were all kind of we were uncomfortable, but everyone had a positive attitude, I think. That was pretty funny. What else? What else happened?
That's a good question and kind of a hard one. I mean, we shot these videos, gosh, almost probably a year and a half ago at this point. So trying to think back at funny, I mean, this one didn't happen on the Uintas investigation. It happened on the Cleveland Lloyd dinosaur investigations that we were doing.
Sure.
But and also, like, I guess funny, in retrospect, I quickly learned that you cannot take food into the museum past the cafe area.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a big mistake and I got a lot of trouble for it. So quickly learned that one too.
Well, thank you so much for your funny stories. Friends, first of all, if you would like to see the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry investigation that Colby's talking about, it's available on demand on our Research Quest website. We thank you so much for tuning in for our interview with Colby and Rob for our amazing Uinta investigation. Thank you so much for joining us, y'all. And tomorrow we have an hour-long interview starting at 9:30 Mountain Daylight Time, where we're going to be interviewing Ellen Erickson and talking about lots of different ways that people can get involved in their communities with scientific efforts in their own backyards. Colby and Rob, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody else, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9:30. Bye, friends.
Bye-bye.